My name is Sara Felix, and I'm a lecturer in the Center for Learning and Teaching. I've taught all levels, both pre-university, foundation level, all the way through master's level, on a variety of different courses and disciplines. And primarily, I teach how to engage in an academic debate, how to enter into academic study, and how to create one's own academic voice in their research, so students' research, through the process of writing, which is really what university is about. Normally, in the past, my students have been mainly international students because there's a recognition that international students come from vastly different assessment regimes, and also university systems or secondary school systems in other countries have different focuses compared to universities here in the UK. But actually, over the years, more and more home students are beginning to take my courses because there's a recognition that even within the UK, there's a huge diversity of cultural backgrounds and educational backgrounds. And all students need to sort of learn how to engage with this idea of knowledge creation rather than knowledge reproduction. Primarily, I try to engage students by focusing in a broad sense on the notion of dialogue. The way I look at academics and academic study is really this notion of a dialogue through time. Scholars engage in reading what came before them, both theories and studies, and based on what came before them, they gain new ideas to critique what came before, to hedge it, to expand on it, to offer alternatives. And I look at my students as scholars in training. You know, they're not students of science, they're scientists in training. They're not students of history, they're historians in training. So this means that when I'm trying to get them to engage, to think about their fields, it has to be a dialogue through time with what they're reading. So they need to talk to the scholar that they're reading. They need to talk to each other and really talk to, not at, so that they can hear each other, because each person is bringing a bit of diversity in their interpretation because they all come from different contexts, different, educational backgrounds, different social backgrounds, different national backgrounds. And so they need to speak to each other to help them interpret what they're seeing. And then they need to talk to themselves in this sort of reflective way to see, where is my voice in this, and where am I going to add knowledge? So this means that I engage my students by having space always to talk and to hear. I think my students learn best when they have space, both in the classroom and out of the classroom, in sort of formal settings and informal settings, to test out what they're learning, to question, to think, to digest. So in other words, I feel that my students learn best when there is space in the curriculum, when there is space between these content chunks. They have these heavy readings they have to do, and when there's space between them, purposely designed in the curriculum to allow them to go, what does that mean? Do I agree with that? And what does my own experience of my own background, both educationally and otherwise, depending on the field, bring to this? And how do I change this or understand this for myself? So that means in my classrooms, when I'm designing a course, I always have gaps between set chunks. And it also means my assessment structures have to be reconsidered because I want them to be able to explore their own voice. So when they're learning by exploring, and they need safe places where they can reflect in sort of a narrative way before they go into formal essay titles and research projects where they have to take their own stand. It's going to sound strange, but I don't expect things like, a certain amount of study time, that you get a lot, especially because my students are diverse. They're coming from such diverse backgrounds, both my British students as well as my international students. So my expectations are more about dispositions. And so it's three things. It's a willingness to change their mind, an openness to different ideas than they've ever experienced, and trust that the discomfort they may feel in questioning themselves is worth it. My students and I, we tend to use a wide diversity of resources. I mean, it can be academic texts, narrative texts, first-hand accounts, field trips, labs, e-resources, biographies, fiction. It can be anything, because ultimately it depends on what the learning outcomes are, and it depends on what we're trying to do. And from that, the resources become useful. So a wide variety of anything can enter my classrooms, and I encourage my students to do the same, but to think about what resources do they need for what we're currently doing at that moment in time.